Every day, we wake up and the world is already running. Notifications light up our phones, deadlines wait at the edge of our calendars, people demand answers, input, attention, and without thinking, we do what we've always done. We jump into the day head first, trying to keep up. That's how I lived for a long time. Waking up not with intention, but with reaction. Responding to the day instead of leading it. And the truth is, I never really asked myself why I did any of it. I just did it because that's what I thought was expected. That's what I believed being responsible meant. But then something happened. Not a dramatic event, not a crisis, just a quiet moment of exhaustion. One of those mornings where I looked in the mirror and realized I didn't want to do the day ahead. Not because it was hard, but because it felt empty. I was productive, yes, but I wasn't fulfilled. I was moving, but not driven. It felt like I was living by default, not by design. That moment sparked a small but powerful shift. I decided to start each day by asking a question that changed everything. Why am I doing this? That question doesn't sound revolutionary, it's simple, but the most powerful ideas often are. I didn't just ask it once and move on. I asked it every single morning, before I looked at my phone, before I opened my laptop, before I even got out of bed. Why am I doing what I do? Why does it matter? Why do I should? First, I didn't always have a clear answer. Sometimes the question brought more discomfort than clarity, but over time I realized that the act of asking it was what mattered most, because it forced me to stop running on autopilot. It forced me to lead myself. That's the key, not control, but leadership. And leadership always starts with clarity. Here's what I learned. Purpose isn't a goal. It's not something you check off a list, it's not even something you discover once and carry with you forever. Purpose is something you reconnect with every day. It's a choice, a commitment, a daily practice. When I began my mornings with that question, why am I doing this? It wasn't just about finding some grand world-changing mission. It was about anchoring myself in meaning, even small meaning. Some mornings the answer was simple, because I want to be the kind of person who follows through, or because someone's counting on me today. Other days it was bigger, because helping people grow is what fuels me. That's when I realized I didn't need a dramatic transformation. I needed alignment. I needed my actions to match my reasons. And once I had that alignment, something incredible started happening. I began to say no more clearly. Not out of rebellion, but out of respect. Respect for my time, my energy, and the people I was trying to serve. I started making decisions faster because I wasn't just asking, what should I do? I was asking, does this serve my why? That question became a filter, not a burden. It simplified everything. We often talk about motivation as if it's something we need to chase. But I learned that motivation isn't found in the latest video or book. It's found in clarity. When you wake up and know why you're doing what you're doing, energy comes more naturally, not always in abundance, but in enough. It also changed how I related to other people. When I understood my own why, I became more curious about theirs. I stopped judging people for how they behaved and started asking what's driving them. And in that shift, relationships deepened, empathy grew, because we connect most deeply not through what we do, but through why we do it. This habit, starting my day with why, also gave me permission to be honest with myself. On days when I couldn't find a why for something, I took that as a sign. Sometimes it meant the task needed to change. Sometimes it meant I needed to change. But in either case, the honesty helped me grow. It's amazing what happens when we stop lying to ourselves about what matters. Let me be clear, asking why doesn't always lead to dramatic answers. It doesn't mean you quit your job or start a new life. Often it simply redefines how you approach the life you already have. Washing dishes became a way to show respect for my space. Writing emails became a way to serve people, not just respond. Even commuting felt different because now I was going somewhere with intention. Over the course of a week, I noticed a shift, not in my schedule, but in my spirit. I felt less rushed, less reactive, less scattered. I was still busy, but it wasn't mindless, it was chosen. That's a huge difference. So many people wake up feeling like life is happening to them. But starting with why reminded me that life is happening through me. And that shift from passive to purposeful is where confidence lives. In the world we live in, it's easy to forget why we started. It's easy to let the demands of the day drown out the desires of the heart. But I believe we are all built to contribute something meaningful. That meaning doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be public. But it has to be true. And the only way to find what's true is to ask. Every great movement, invention, breakthrough, whether in a company, a community, or a single human life, begins with a question. Why? It's the origin of all progress. And when you ask it not just once in a while, but every single morning, something begins to align. You begin to lead, not just live. So yes, this habit changed my life. Not because it added more hours to my day, not because it made me more productive, but because it gave me a reason. And when we live with reason, we live with resilience. When we lead with purpose, we become the kind of people others trust, and most importantly, the kind of people we can be proud of. It's not magic. It's just a moment, a pause, a question. But it's enough to rewire everything that follows. Start your day with why. And watch the day rise to meet you. We live in a culture that worships activity. We equate motion with progress. We believe that if we're not doing something, responding to emails, sitting in meetings, checking the news, scrolling through something, we're falling behind. Silence is awkward. Stillness is uncomfortable. And solitude is almost taboo. It's become something we avoid, not something we value. But I discovered quite unexpectedly that solitude isn't a luxury, it's essential. In fact, scheduling solitude was one of the most important decisions I made, not just for my productivity, but for my sanity, my clarity, and my leadership. It started with a moment of restlessness. I had just wrapped up a long day, one of those days where you check off a dozen things, but none of them feel like they moved you forward. I was tired but not fulfilled. I was wired but not awake. I remember sitting on my couch, phone in hand, bouncing from one app to another and thinking, when was the last time I was alone with my thoughts? Not just alone in a room, but truly alone in my own head, without distraction, without input, without noise. That question landed hard. Because the truth was, I couldn't remember. I was constantly consuming, reacting, performing, and I realized I had lost touch with something essential, the sound of my own voice. Not the one I use in meetings or on calls, the one that only speaks up when the world goes quiet. So the next morning, I did something that felt counterintuitive. Before opening my inbox, before checking messages, before jumping into the momentum of the day, I blocked off 15 minutes on my calendar. I labeled it solitude. That was it. No agenda, no objective, just space, just time. And to be honest, the first time I did it, it felt strange, unproductive, even a little selfish. I sat there, no music, no phone, no input, and my mind raced. Everything in me wanted to reach for something to fill the space. But I didn't. I sat and I waited. And then something interesting began to happen. The noise began to settle. Slowly, like mud sinking in a glass of water. And in that stillness, thoughts emerged that I hadn't heard in weeks. Not new ideas, forgotten ones. Questions I had been too busy to consider. Feelings I had ignored in the name of getting things done, truths that had been buried under busyness. In that moment of solitude, I met myself again. Not the version I show to the world, but the one that lives behind the scenes. The one who's not performing, not proving, just being. That first session of solitude was only 15 minutes, but the impact lasted all day. I felt more grounded, more focused, more aware, so I did it again the next day. And again the day after that. It became a habit, a daily ritual. Not because it made me more productive, though it did, but because it made me more present, more intentional. more human. What I began to understand was this: solitude isn't about escaping the world. It's about creating space to re-enter it more fully. When we're constantly reacting, we lose perspective. When we're constantly plugged in, we stop listening to ourselves, to others, to what truly matters. Solitude gives us back our capacity for thought. It restores the ability to think clearly, to feel deeply, to choose wisely. Some people say they don't have time for solitude. I used to say the same thing. But the truth is, we make time for what we value. And if we don't value our own clarity, we'll never find the time to reclaim it. Solitude isn't about time, it's about intention. You don't need an hour in the woods. Sometimes all it takes is 10 minutes in a quiet corner. But those 10 minutes can mean the difference between reacting and leading, between following the crowd and listening to your own compass. One of the most surprising things I learned was that solitude made me a better listener. You'd think that sitting alone makes you more self-centrist, but actually, it helped me show up more fully for others. Because when my mind was clear, when I had made space to process my own thoughts and emotions, I had more room to hold space for others. I wasn't distracted by my own mental noise. I was available, attentive. It also helped me become a better decision maker. So often we make choices in the noise. We react to urgency, we respond to pressure. But when I practiced solitude, I started making decisions from a place of clarity, not anxiety. I found that the answers I was looking for didn't always need more information, they needed more space, more quiet, more time to surface. Solitude also revealed some hard truths. There were things I had been avoiding, emotions I had buried under tasks, questions I had delayed by staying busy. When the world goes quiet, those things come to the surface, and while it can be uncomfortable, it's also liberating. Because we can't address what we won't acknowledge. And we can't grow if we don't. Get honest. There's a reason some of the most impactful leaders, thinkers, artists, and visionaries have all practiced solitude. Not because they were antisocial, but because they understood that clarity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from stillness. It comes from listening inward before speaking outward. It comes from giving yourself the gift of attention before giving it to the world. The habit of scheduled solitude is deceptively simple. It doesn't look impressive. It won't get applause. You won't post about it. But it will change you. Quietly, powerfully. Over time, you begin to hear things you've missed. You begin to see patterns. You begin to recover your voice. And in a world that's constantly telling us who to be, that voice is priceless. So yes, I scheduled solitude, I treated it like an appointment, and in doing so, I gave myself back something I didn't know I had lost. My inner authority. My direction. My alignment. The world still spins, the emails still come, the pressure hasn't disappeared. But now I meet it from a place of wholeness, not depletion. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. You just have to be still long enough to hear them. So I keep that appointment with myself every morning, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because the quiet teaches me things the noise never could. And in those 15 minutes, I remember who I am before the world tells me who to be. That is the power of solitude. And that is why I'll never stop making space for it. There's a strange badge of honor we wear in today's world. It's the badge of being busy. The more plates we spin, the more we feel like we matter. We juggle, we multitask, we keep dozens of tabs open on our browsers and in our minds. We answer emails during meetings, we text during meals, we think about work while we're with our families and think about our families while we're at work. And in all that movement, we believe we're being productive. But what we're really doing is dividing ourselves thinner and thinner until there's almost nothing left that's whole. That was me. For a long time, I wore that badge with pride. I measured my worth by how much I could handle at once. If I wasn't juggling 5 things at once, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I believed that multitasking was not only efficient, it was essential. Until one day, I looked back on a week filled with activity and realized I couldn't remember a single thing I had done with full attention. Everything had been touched, but nothing had been truly held. That was the moment I began to question everything I thought I knew about being effective. I started asking myself, what if I stopped trying to do everything? What if I simply chose one thing and did it fully? Not forever, just for one day. That question felt radical. It felt almost irresponsible, but I couldn't shake it, so I tried it. I started with something simple. I picked one task, just one, that truly mattered that day, something that moved the needle, that aligned with my purpose, that deserved my full self. I made a decision. For the next hour, however long it took, I would be fully there. No toggling between tabs, no checking my phone, no mental rehearsals of what's next, just full, present, undivided attention. It was harder than I expected, the urge to check something, to respond to a notification, to switch tasks. It was like an itch. But once I pushed through that discomfort, something powerful began to happen. My mind began to settle. My thoughts lined up instead of scattering. I moved slower, but with more intention. And by the end of that one task, something strange happened. I felt satisfied. Not exhausted, not scattered, satisfied. It was a kind of deep fulfillment I hadn't felt in a long time. That day taught me something I'd been missing for years. Depth creates meaning. When we divide our attention across a dozen things, we rob ourselves of the depth required to feel, to truly contribute, to leave a mark. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters with presence and purpose. So I kept going. Each morning that week, I asked myself, what is the one thing that matters most today? Not the loudest thing, not the most urgent thing, but the most important thing. Something that if I did it fully, would create value, real value. Some days that one thing was a work project, other days it was a conversation I'd been avoiding. Once it was taking time to think, not just act. And once I identified that thing, I made it sacred. I carved out time, cleared distractions, and gave it everything I had. And the results? I accomplished fewer tasks, but more progress. I was less busy, but more effective. I felt less drained and more energized. The more I practiced this, the more I realized how much time and energy I'd been losing to divided focus. It's not the number of tasks that drain us, it's the cost of constantly shifting our attention from one thing to another without ever landing. This habit of doing one thing fully also changed the quality of my work. Ideas became sharper, solutions came faster, conversations became more meaningful, because I was no longer skimming the surface of everything. I was going deep on what mattered. And in that depth, I found not just clarity, but connection. Connection to the task, connection to the purpose behind it, connection to the people it impacted. One of the most profound changes was in how I related to other people. When I was in a conversation, I was in the conversation. No mental checklist running in the background, no quick glances at my phone, just full presence. And people noticed. They opened up more. They listened more. Because presence is contagious. When someone senses that they have your full attention, it gives them permission to bring their full self too. That kind of exchange can't happen in half-listening, half-doing environments. It only happens when we choose to be where we are fully. There's something else I learned. Doing one thing fully doesn't mean doing everything perfectly. It means doing it with integrity, with presence, with care, even when it's small. Especially when it's small. I started applying this habit to the mundane things too. Washing dishes, folding laundry, walking from one room to another. And even those small acts began to feel different. Because it wasn't about what I was doing. It was about how I was doing it. We think multitasking makes us more valuable, but in truth it often makes us more forgettable. When we do many things at once, We rarely do anything in a way that leaves a mark, but when we do one thing with full presence, people feel it, we feel it, and it makes a difference. There's a beautiful paradox here. The world tells us that success comes from doing more, but real impact comes from doing less more deeply. Not every day will be perfect. Life happens. Urgencies arise. But even on those days, this habit gives me an anchor. It reminds me that I am not a machine designed to maximize output. I am a human being designed to contribute meaning. And meaning doesn't come from motion. It comes from intention. So yes, I chose one thing to do fully each day. And that one decision created a ripple effect I never expected. It made me calmer, clearer, more connected. And the best part, it made me proud. Not of how much I got done, but of how I showed up. We don't need to do more. We need to be more present in what we do. Because it's not about volume, it's about value. It's not about activity, it's about impact. And impact doesn't come from scattered motion. It comes from focused presence. So tomorrow, try it. Ask yourself, what is the one thing that matters most today? Then give it everything. You might be surprised by how much changes when just one thing is done with your whole self. There's a truth I've come to believe deeply. We're not tired because we do too much. We're tired because we forget to notice why we do what we do. We lose sight of meaning, and in the absence of meaning, even the smallest task can feel like a burden. That's what happened to me. I didn't hit a wall because my calendar was too full. I hit it because my heart was too empty. I was achieving, sure, moving forward, crossing things off lists, but something inside me felt hollow. I wasn't ungrateful, I just wasn't giving my gratitude a voice, and that, I realized, makes all the difference. It all started with a morning when everything felt heavy. I had slept well, nothing major was wrong, but emotionally I was flat. I sat at my desk staring at my to-do list, and I couldn't find the energy to care about any of it. It was like someone had turned down the volume on everything good in my life. And in that quiet, one simple question popped into my mind. What have I forgotten to appreciate? It was instinctive, almost like my inner compass was trying to point me back to something I'd lost sight of. Without thinking much, I pulled out a notebook, just a scrap piece of paper, really, and I started writing. No structure, no bullet points, just a quick, messy list of everything I could think of that I was thankful for. The smell of coffee, the way my dog greets me like I've returned from war, even if I just stepped outside for 5 minutes. A text from a friend I hadn't heard from in months. The warmth of sunlight on my face that morning wasn't poetic, wasn't organized. It was just honest. And it only took 5 minutes. But when I finished, something had shifted. The heaviness wasn't gone, but it had loosened. The fog hadn't lifted completely, but I could see a few steps ahead again. Most of all, I felt connected to my life, to the people in it, to the little moments that usually pass by unnoticed. That 5-minute gratitude dump became a lifeline. Not a solution to all my problems, but a way to reconnect with what gives those problems context and perspective. I didn't expect it to become a habit. I thought it was a one-time thing, a way to reset a rough morning. But the next day, almost without realizing it, I found myself reaching for that notebook again. And again the day after that. Within a week, I was making time for it intentionally. Before I touched my phone, before the noise of the day could reach me, 5 minutes, just me, a pen, and the decision to notice what was good. Here's what I learned. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a discipline, a muscle. And like any muscle, if we don't use it, it weakens. We live in a world where attention is constantly hijacked by news, by urgency, by comparison. And gratitude is the quiet rebellion against all of it. It says, I see what's good even when life is hard. I choose to name it. I choose to feel it. Not because everything is perfect, but because not everything